Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the congressional record Part 2 of the interim report that I have prepared for the House of Representatives entitled Unwelcome in Niger.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to warn this body of the deteriorating conditions in the African country of Niger and to give rise to the concern of service members and contractors. More than 1,000 of them right now are functionally being held hostage in Niger. They are being used as pawns during a negotiation that has left America at the bended knee of third world criminals and thugs as our troops seek medicine and fresh water and troop rotations. How did we get here with more than 1,100 Americans endangered right now in Niger? Well, it started back in March of 2023. Secretary of State Antony Blinken went to Niger and proclaimed that it was a model of resilience, a platform for great democracy. It would be where America would execute its Africa strategy. 1 year later, almost to the day, there was a coup in Niger. And guess who overthrew the government that we said was the great model of resilience? People we trained. We trained the coup leaders to go throw out the democratically elected government of Niger. And I know this will surprise you, but after that occurs, they say they want our bases that U.S. taxpayers have poured more than $1 billion into gone. They want our service members gone. And so I came to this floor after hearing from some of my constituents who were stationed in Niger. And after the overthrow of the government, there weren't resupply flights. They said, Congressman, we are going to be out of medicine in May if we don't get this sorted out. 3 days after I filed Part 1 of the report that I am supplementing today, the Biden administration announced that we will be leaving Niger. A welcome sign, I'm sure, but the leaving didn't actually happen. We have people who are now more than 200 days into a 180-day rotation, and while the negotiation regarding retrograde and withdrawal are ongoing, the government in Niger is using the well-being and health of our service members as leverage to get what they want out of our government. Our troops aren't getting medicine for malaria, for cholesterol, for their blood pressure, chronic conditions. And I've received the letters from the wives, from the fathers of the people who are in Niger now, and they say, we know that our family members are being extorted by the local governments when they try to leave, hundreds of dollars to even bring a bag through the airport. We know that Russians are behind the wire. You know what a real U.S. president would do? Say that C-130s are on their way to Niger today with the water and the medicine and the food our troops need, that they will have a full fighter pilot escort there. And if the Nigerian government or any other third world thug tries to even turn on their air defense systems, we should show those leaders and those thugs what the target package looks like on their houses and their family members, because it should not be Americans that are suffering because President Biden and Blinken are so embarrassed that their strategy in Africa failed that they're willing to let Americans' conditions deteriorate. They're willing to let our military spouses and family members wonder what's going to happen to their loved ones with their blood pressure rising and no blood pressure medication, or concerned what will happen now that we're in May and there's not sufficient malaria medication. We should always keep our people's well-being at the forefront of our minds. And today we should be resupplying our troops in Niger, Africa, and we should dare these thugs and criminals to mess with us while we're doing that. This is a total embarrassment, but saving politicians and people like Biden and Blinken from embarrassment is not worth putting U.S. troops at risk. I will stay on this. I will stay on our government and the Nigerian government to ensure that our military members and their families are appropriately treated and their concerns are elevated to the highest levels of this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back. I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record of the House the document styled Unwelcome in Niger, the interim report from Congressman Matt Gaetz on the U.S. crisis in Niger. Mr. Speaker, I come to the House floor this evening to expose a cover-up in the African country of Niger. This cover-up exists to conceal the humiliating failures of the Biden administration in Niger, throughout Africa, and throughout the world. You'll learn of the victims of this cover-up, the 1,100 U.S. troops who are currently stationed in Niger, functionally stranded by a Biden administration which cares more about saving face than saving their lives. Our troops in Niger have been pleading for help. They've sent intelligence reports and letters stating that they are rarely getting safe water. They can't get diplomatic oversights to receive medicine, fresh troop rotations, or basic supplies. They have no mission. And the local authorities are becoming increasingly hostile. The current government of Niger has called the U.S. presence in the country illegal. Why have these pleas not been heard? It is because U.S. Embassy Niger has been blocking the intelligence. I fear as we speak, the conditions may be forming to create another Benghazi-style attack. So how did we get here? With 1,100 American troops stuck, thoroughly unwelcome, in a country where we have invested more than $500 million U.S. taxpayer dollars. It all began when Biden and Blinken chose Niger to be the centerpiece of their Africa strategy. Blinken even visited the country in March of last year, saying, quote, "Niger is an extraordinary model, a model of resilience, a model of democracy, a model of cooperation." What a difference a year makes. Just a year and a day after those remarks, the democratically elected government of Niger was replaced by a military coup. And the United States military literally trained the coup leaders. I asked General Langley, who runs AFRICOM, why this happened, why so many coup leaders are trained by our service members, and he said, well, Congressman, training people to overthrow their democratically elected governments is not in our curriculum. But the results are staggering and embarrassing. In Guinea, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and other countries, there were coups, and in each of those coups there was one common element: U.S. training for the coup leaders. Now, the coup government currently in charge of Niger wouldn't even meet with General Langley when he went to talk about our base. The Prime Minister literally slammed the door in his face. You'd think if we trained you to overthrow your democratically elected government, we could at least get a meeting. But instead of a burgeoning pro-U.S. sentiment, we now have the coup leaders we trained turning to Russia as their preferred security partner. So where does that leave our 1,100 troops, our Americans? I did not serve in the military. I represent a military community, and I hear that these senior enlisted service members at a U.S. installation abroad, they're a big deal. They're kind of like the mayor of the installation. And the senior enlisted service member at Air Base 101 in Niger wrote a letter to Congressman Dusty Johnson. Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record. Dear Congressman Johnson, I am writing to express my deep concern regarding the actions taken by U.S. Embassy Niger, particularly involving the Ambassador Kathleen A. Fitzgibbon. The recent events have raised serious questions about the conduct and decision-making of these officials, and I believe Congress must address these issues. As a service member deployed to Niger, Africa, I have noticed that the embassy intentionally suppressed intelligence information from the ground, forced collection elements to maintain the facade of a great country-to-country relationship. They failed to be transparent with U.S. service members deployed to the country. They gave a pretense that things are being worked and that it's above our level, all the while diplomatic oversight clearances for U.S. military aircraft were purposefully not being approved by the country's military government as a political bargaining chip to entice the U.S. government back to negotiate their withdrawal. Since July 23rd, the day of the coup d'etat, the Americans deployed here have not been able to perform their primary mission. They've been told to sit and hold. It's clear that the country of Niger does not want a permanent military presence in their country, and they have informed us that we need to leave. At this time, there are approximately 1,100 U.S. service members in the country who are essentially being held hostage from returning to their homes and to their families while the State Department continues with failed diplomacy by not communicating with the country of Niger on what the withdrawal plan would look like. Additionally, the government of Niger is not processing visas for U.S. service members for entry into the country, which is especially concerning because the U.S. forces were scheduled to end a 6-month deployment early this month when relief forces arrived. The embassy failed to share any of this information with decision makers at any level of the Department of Defense regarding this, further complicating our ability to conduct the swap of personnel. These actions have deeply troubled me and many others in the community at home, as well as the service members deployed here with me and their families back in the States. Our diplomatic and defense representatives need to uphold the highest standards of professionalism and ethical conduct, especially in sensitive regions like Niger. The actions taken by the embassy officials not only reflect poorly on the United States, but also have potential implications for our bilateral relations with other partner nations and the safety of our personnel in this region. When I became aware of this letter, my office conducted a number of interviews which confirmed the claims made by the senior enlisted official, and he signed his name to that letter, which we have entered into the record. And we've done those investigations, and we've learned that the top public health official says that in the month of May, they are going to run out of medicine in Niger. And it's worse than that. Our partner countries, Italy and Germany, you would think they would help us facilitate medicine and supplies, but they won't even help transport needed materiel to our service members because they're worried about being expelled from the country. And if that isn't worse, the fact that we've got Russia as the preferred security partner now means there are Russians behind the wire at Air Base 101. We have Russians on our base somewhere. That would never happen. But the only reason it's happening is because Blinken and Biden are humiliated that their plan failed, that they poured $500 million into this country where now we're being thrown out by the scruff of our neck. Well, Joe Biden and Tony Blinken's failures should not have to be visited on the 1,100 service members there who are there fighting for us, wanting to do patriotic duty, and are being held hostage, and they are being stranded. And I will fight for them, and I will fight against this administration that would use our service members as pawns because they can't get their act together. Just because Biden and Blinken can't say oops doesn't mean we should abandon our troops. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back to the gentleman from Utah, and I thank him for his indulgence in the time.
Absolutely. Thank you to the gentleman from